G'day everyone, Dicko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. This is part 10 of a 10-part series that covers modeling for animation. And yes, this is the last video of this series, and it's been a lot of fun making it, but all good things must come to an end. But before we wrap up, I want to talk about one really cool thing, and that is reusing the models you create to create other characters. And not only does it save time in terms of modeling and not having to start from scratch, but it's also great for rigging and animation. So obviously we've been working on Sophie for this past 9 videos, but with this video we're taking her and changing her into this big, fat, muscly dude. And believe it or not, apart from the breast tissue, the underlying mesh and edge flow is exactly the same as Sophie. Nothing has changed, it's all the same, with exception of course of the clothing, which, you know, has to be made according to the character. But the body itself, including the face, the crotch, the butt, the legs and the arms, the actual edge flow and the mesh itself is practically identical. So as such, this video is actually going to be a really simple thing to talk about because really when you think about it, there's not much modeling involved apart from the clothing. So, you know, obviously we already talked about that in the previous videos, so really it's about just pushing and pulling verts around to get Sophie to turn into this boss man dude that I have concepted up. And what I'm doing here, I'm basically just removing or hiding things that are no longer applicable to this new character that I'm going to be modeling up. So, but I am keeping it there just in case. You never know if they're going to be useful in the future, so it's good to keep a backup in case. The next thing to do is to actually swap out the concept art for the character. So I've basically just duplicated this file and renamed it, and we're good to go. So I can change whatever I want without really affecting the original Sophie file. And this guy is going to be quite a bit bigger than Sophie, so I'm scaling up my reference file to sort of match the supposed scale of my character. So he's around just under 2 meters tall, so I'm just going to place him around that 2 meter mark from head to toe. And I'll do the same with the other one as well. And to make life easier, I might just delete the other side view and then duplicate my front view and place it where I need to. You don't have to do this, I just felt like doing it in this case because I thought it felt easier. But if you just want to swap out the image, that's cool too. Alright, with the housekeeping out the way, now it's time to start splitting up our mesh into different quadrants so we can work on parts individually. So if you haven't done it already, make sure you have split up your model in half, deleted the other half, and then applied a new mirror modifier. Because of course, why would you want to double your work, right? Alright, so with the arm loop selected, I want to separate that as a mesh. And then sort of place it where I need to, roughly speaking. And I'll do the same thing with the head and the legs. And I'm doing this because with regards to these two different characters, the change in the body type is pretty drastic. So rather than stretching the entire body all around, I want to stretch individual parts around rather than the whole body because it's much more manageable to achieve properly. And of course, just be clever about where you are separating the different limbs. You know, you want to keep the crotch as a part of the torso, for instance. And you want to keep the shoulders as a part of the torso as well. So you cut the arm off just before it hits the shoulders. So the perfect place to cut the arms off is just at that loop that we added between the shoulders and the arms when we were building out our initial mesh. And again, a bit more organizational stuff required, just moving the eyes and the teeth with the gums to another collection. And we'll bring those back once they're important enough to, you know, deal with. Now, unless your male character has some serious man boobage going on, we need to remove some of that flesh and sort of build out the chest muscle that lies underneath it. So just remove the loops that build out the breast and then do a grid fill. And if that doesn't work properly, just be clever and connect the appropriate faces to get a clean loop. And what you should end up with is a loop that sort of travels up to the shoulder and down to the arm. So that helps to fill out that chest muscle and keep the edge flow that we were building out with the Sophie mesh. And now I'm just sort of really roughly just stretching out the proportions to fit the sort of shape of my character here. And I just wanted to show you this because I want to emphasize that things look really, really fucked up for quite a bit of the time during this recording. It looks really creepy and stretched and just weird. But eventually, once you start fleshing things out and have a bit of patience, things start to look a little bit more natural. And just notice that I'm switching pretty often between sculpting and just editing things in edit mode. There's no rules here when it comes to how you want to push and pull these verts, but I do really like the fact that I get to go in and out of a more precise editing mode into something that's a little bit more generalized. And I doubt there's many people out there that are using Maya and watching these as tutorials, but the same rules apply here. You can easily just use the sculpt tools in Maya and do the same thing. Pop in and out of the sculpt tools, jump into edit mode, play with the verts, and then do the same. And look at the side there. It looks like a big flat pancake. So now it's just a matter of pushing out that belly, getting in that chest. And here's another thing about the edge flow that I didn't really mention much about in the previous video when I added that loop into the stomach. By adding that loop into the stomach, it gives you the opportunity to add volume to the stomach, because that loop, if you had to, you could add extra loops around that abdomen with zero impact on the rest of the mesh. So there will be no spans traveling up the body or around the body. It's just traveling around that abdomen face loop. So the performance hit is pretty minimal. In this case, I'm not going to add it because I don't feel like I need it. But notice how just by having that one single loop, I'm able to fill out that stomach a lot easier than if I didn't have it there before. And even at this early stage, you can start to see the structure of the body come into play. So you start to see that chest come and pop out. You're starting to see the stomach pop out. And now it's just about you know, playing with what's already there. You don't need to add anything. Just be patient. Sculpt what you need to sculpt, edit what you need to edit, and just push and pull things that are already there. Now I'm about to go into hyperdrive with this time lapse because the rest of the time is basically repeating this process over and over again, pushing and pulling, moving things around, getting it in line with the design. And every now and then you might see me, you know, apply the mirror modifier, sculpt things out, then erase one half and reapply the mirror modifier from time to time. And that's really just to make sure that I get a smooth sculpt in the center line of the body. So I'm just fleshing out these legs, and soon I'll get to the point where I can rejoin the legs to the body. And because I haven't added any extra geometry or any extra loops, rejoining those legs should be problem free. So there shouldn't be any issues. It's the same amount of spans, same amount of edges on both the top and the bottom of the leg and the hips. So it should be a very simple affair. And I've had a few people ask about, you know, what do you do with geometry and edge flow when you want to make someone that's more muscular or bulky? And their answer is there is no difference. You can still make a bulky, fat, or muscular character with very simple edge flow. You're actually better off in most cases just using textures to emphasize muscle structure. Unless of course you plan on doing some ultra realistic muscle structure. basic loops just do perfectly fine. You don't really need to worry about it. Best example I could think of, do you really think that the geometry of the characters from the Gears of War series, who are absolutely ripped, fat, muscular dudes, do you think the game assets actually have all the muscles modeled into that game asset? Most likely not. It's, you know, purely texturing that makes them look super bulky, muscular, the veins, the you know, the rippling biceps, all that sort of stuff. That's all just texturing. The underlying mesh itself would be very simple. And you may have just seen that I've joined the legs. Very simple, just merge the verts where they used to be. Very simple. Same with the arm. You know, press M, merge the center, repeat. And you can see, just with the existing geometry, there's plenty of bulk to go around. There's plenty of geometry there to fill out that body. You'd be surprised how far you can stretch it. And as long as the distribution of the verts and the mesh is fairly uniform, you won't really need to worry about adding any extra geometry at all. Alright, jumping into the face, and this is a weird looking one already. So yeah, quickly just smashing out the blocking of the face with the existing geometry. I literally add nothing to this thing. I'm just working with what's already there. And yeah, you can see, like, just, you know, getting that bulk into the cheekbone, the brow line. All those loops are there to add to that structure. They already exist. It's just that the male character here has a much stronger profile to work with. But because the loops are there to help aid in completing or creating that structure to begin with in characters that have much softer features, the bone structure and the muscle structure are still exactly the same. It doesn't really matter how big or small the character is. If they're humanoid in nature, they are going to follow the same principles. And again, I rejoined that neck just like I did with the arms. Same verts, same edge number as it was from the beginning, so merging it was not an issue. Now, I'm sure there are some people out there that are going, oh man, Dicko, you took me through 10 videos on how to create a single character, and now you're kind of showing me how to make a character with only one video. Couldn't I just have gotten a base mesh from somewhere online and worked with that to make my characters? Well, yeah, no shit, of course you could have, but that's not why you're here, right? Plus, where's the fun in that? Furthermore, there are such a thing as good base meshes and bad base meshes, and I kind of covered that in the first video. The other advantage of building a model from scratch and then using that model to create your other characters is that, again, if you plan on making these a cast for a game or a short film or an animation, you are building your mesh according to the budgets you have, whether that's performance budgets, rigging budgets, technical budgets, etc. By building your own mesh, you're building it to your own sort of poly count limits, you're building it to the needs of your characters in your animation, and that only makes life easier in your production long term. And this becomes even more important if you're working in a team. So if you're creating characters and they all have different geometries and different edge flows and all sorts of shit, the guy that has to rig those characters is going to have a bad time. And they will want to rip your freaking throat out. Because imagine this, imagine you make one character and you rig it to an armature. So therefore it has all the proper vertex / weight paints you need to make that rig or make that mesh to form properly. Okay, so now you need to make another character with the same rig, same animation, all that sort of stuff. Technically, all you would need to do is realign that mesh to fit the proportions of your new character. Then again, realign the armature to fit the proportions of your new character. And as long as that joint structure, relatively speaking, is in the same position as the original character, relative to the new mesh that is, that animation, that weight paint, all that stuff will be inherited to the new character. So you wouldn't have to redo any of that. Just realign the rig and you're good to go. Now, clearly that's in the perfect scenario bucket, but technically you could do it. And technically it does work because I've done it before. That's where the magic of having an identical mesh structure across all your characters comes into play. And of course there are limits to this. I mean, if a character is radically different to another character, then you may have to redo the model itself. But You know, if you have a bunch of human characters that are kind of the same proportion and pretty much do the same thing and have the same style, then there's no excuse not to just reuse old assets. And yeah, speaking of style, by having that same mesh structure, you are effectively, you have a basis to work off of to maintain the style across the entirety of your character cast, which is also another awesome advantage here. So the body here is almost done. If you haven't noticed, the proportions pretty much are all kind of working out. Just tweaking a few things here and there, but ultimately it's all come together, and I really haven't added any other geometry. I was just pushing and pulling verts, sculpting, going back and forth, trial and error, that sort of thing. And now I'm pretty much ready to go on and make the clothing. Honestly speaking, modeling the clothing is pretty much the only thing you need to do from scratch. And there's a clear reason for that. Look at the proportions between the two characters and also their clothing style. They're completely different. So me trying to realign the, I don't know, the kimono of Sophie to fit with the boss man's proportions seems kind of stupid. You're better off just copying some of the mesh like we did in the previous videos and then just morphing it into these new clothing items. And that's pretty much what I do for the rest of the video here. So the next 5 minutes or so is basically a culmination of all the skills we've learnt over the last 10 videos when it comes to clothing, hair, and other features. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the process and watch the clothing come to life, because I literally have no other insight to give you. But besides that, I may as well take the time for saying thank you to everyone who's watched the video so far. The response has been absolutely amazing and super positive, and I've been loving the fact that everyone's been engaging with the videos, commenting where they want to, and asking questions. It's been awesome. Additionally, it's been even better seeing people actually make stuff with these videos. I've seen a few people share their things, they've tagged me in their work, and I'm quite honestly blown away with the quality of the output that you guys are making. So again, super proud of you guys for following through with videos and actually creating stuff that you are proud of. It's even crazier when you hear that some people have never made a character before and they pump out something that looks really good. So super cool stuff. So again, thank you for watching, thank you for participating, and thank you for making shit with my tutorials. It's been really cool. Alright, so we're getting into the end game here, and instead of bringing this character into Mixer mode and just doing some standard animation, I'm actually going to use Rigify to quickly rig up this character along with Sophie using the same Rigify structure, just to demonstrate how easy it is to transfer animation across from one character to another. I won't show the process because we have a whole nother series to worry about with that one, but it's just a great way to show you that by reusing the same geometry from one character to another, how efficient the process can be. Alright, in Blender we have Sophie in one file and we have Bossman in another file. So let's have a quick look at our rig breakdown and see how I've placed these joints. So in Sophie's face, for instance, we can see that I've added the joints in a pretty particular pattern. So according to the Rigify structure, this is just using an auto rigger built into Blender. I've placed the joints at the poles in certain parts of the eye structure. The lips have an even distribution of joints across the mouth. The eyelids, the same thing. So they have a joint that sort of spreads across every second span. You know, the shoulders are kind of in the same spot. So the shoulders are ending up there and there. You know, legs are pretty straightforward. The hips are pretty straightforward, and the same goes with the hand. So with the rig structure like that, let's have a look and compare with Bossman. So here's Bossman, same deal. Apart from that little joint being a little bit closer to the nose, we have the same joint sticking to the pole there. We have it sticking to the pole here. Same distribution of joints across the mouth and the eyes. Same position for the shoulder structure. And the same goes for the legs and the arms and the hands. Now let's have a look at this with animation. So let me just turn off those motion paths so you get a better idea. Turn off the wireframe. Same goes with Sophie. Turn off the wireframe. Alright, now let's play this back and see. Check that walk cycle out. So it's walking pretty sweet. Looking pretty bulky. And this is a bulky fat man walk cycle, I guess you could say. But then you look at it with Sophie. Same walk cycle. Doesn't look too bad, but she looks a bit more assertive than you'd think. But that animation is actually identical to that of the Bossman. And I could prove it with our graph editor. So let's select all of our controls across both rigs. So I'm bringing back the visibility on all my controls here. Turn off the deformed joints as visible. Now I'm going to select everything here. Select everything there, and you can see the curves. Look at the curves, okay? The curves are identical. It's the exact same animation. Exact same. How cool is that? So with this animation, I was actually animated Bossman separately and then imported Bossman's animation and just reprojected it onto Sophie's rig because it's exactly the same. And because the mesh structure of the characters are almost basically the same, I'm getting a very reliable, similar result with the deformations of her character. How cool is that? And I'll prove that with a quick render of both characters, and I'll overlay them on top of one another. Alright, so here's Bossman walking along with this walk cycle. And now here's Sophie with the exact same walk cycle. Same loop. Absolutely seamless transition between the two characters. Partly because of the rig and partly because of the mesh, we get a very, very reliable result in the end, which is so cool. There it is again. So as you can see, this is why it's so good to have good topology, consistent design, and a well thought out mesh. And even better, you can reproject it to new characters and continue creating, so even better. So that concludes our 10-part series on modeling for animation. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. Might be texturing, might be rigging, but we'll see. But until then, catch us and have fun.